Hello and welcome to the Anyone Can Play Guitar podcast,
which gives you, the listener, a series of hints and pointers on your journey as a musical artist,
providing you with interviews from those in the music industry, along with our own experiences.
Ben and James shine some light on the many pitfalls and opportunities that being a musician has to offer.
Last week I was on Shed 7's tour bus speaking to Rick Witter about instant pleasures, comebacks, record deals and social media. This week we meet Frank Turner following the release of his latest album Be More Kind, which has instantly hit the top 3 in the UK album charts. With Frank we discuss playing live, philosophy and what success looks like.
Hello and welcome to episode 31 with me, Ben, and him,
James.
James, I've got a letter for you.
A letter?
A letter which is almost 7 years old.
Right, it's not from a listener.
No. We have never given our address out on this.
I was just wondering where
it came from.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to tell you who it's from. You have to guess.
Right.
It's strictly private and confidential.
Well, I like it when people make these things strict.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't want it loosely
private
and confidential.
You wouldn't. There's a reference number and a document number. Here's the crux of the letter.
Right.
Ben, that's me. Herewith, a CD of Frank Turner's, in air quotes, greatest hits, as compiled by me. I should be grateful if you would listen to it and become a fan ahead of Kendall. This was my first introduction to our guest today, Frank Turner.
And as of this week, I believe, 3rd in the album chart?
Yes, he was racing for the number 1, but then Greatest Showman pipped him, as it's pipping everyone at the minute. But yes, we caught him pre-Be More Kind release on his tour.
Yes, just marginally. 6 shows in.
6 shows of 120 left. Whew. That is a tour. And he did have a throat infection, which I think is just a byproduct of starting a tour. And he does shout, but he's like a very loud singer. So I can see how easy it is for him to get one. But in the gig that night, a lot of his crowd do a lot of singing for him as well, which is good.
Yeah, and testimony to the man himself that it would be easy to cancel interviews like ours.
Without a doubt.
When your throat's knackered and...
Mm-hmm. But we were one of about 8 people who...
constant stream, yeah. He was definitely in media slot.
Definitely in media slot, but also it was a case of you have this amount of time with him, but he was also like, yeah, we'll just go on a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So I think he's his own worst enemy for that sort of thing. But he is a nice bloke, and that's probably where it comes from.
Yeah.
So one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to Frank was about his live performances. Now, I've spoke about live performances with Paul Smith and various other people, but whether you know Frank Turner, liked Frank Turner, indifferent to Frank Turner, if you see him live, you remember that show. And I've always enjoyed it, even when I wasn't a full official fan at that point, when Roper sent that letter, because didn't really know much about him. The letter, the CD, and the live performance definitely swayed me into fandom.
Good.
But rather than me talking about it, let's hear what Frank has to say. Welcome to the podcast, Frank Turner.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Excellent. How are you today?
I'm okay. I've got a throat infection at the moment, which is miserable.
Which is great for a singer.
Yes, I know it happens on tour from time to time. It's a pain in the arse, but we'll soldier on.
So what number gig is this of the tour? Have we got many?
Of the tour, this is about show number 6. We've got about 120 left this year. It's fun. We've got day off tomorrow. So
yeah, that's good. So Newcastle tonight. I've seen you here before, actually, right. And the temperature in the room that night was outrageous.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main things I wanted to talk about actually today, because when we were playing live, I loved playing live. It was my favourite part of what we did.
Yeah.
And your shows are legendary, I guess. Hot, fast, get the crowd going.
Yeah.
All that. How much of a conscious choice is that for you?
I mean, reasonably conscious. Yeah. I mean, I grew up. It's funny. there are times at which I feel like I'm cheating a little bit. And what I mean by that is that I grew up going to see hardcore bands. That was my main thing I did as a kid, was go to hardcore shows. So I'd go and see bands like Indecision, Secret All, Agnostic Front, Vision, Maximum Penalty, all that kind of stuff. And the sort of hardcore approach, and I mean specifically hardcore as opposed to punk, like the hardcore approach to shows was extremely athletic. Do you know what I mean? And like, and I loved it, and it was just like bands just absolutely going nuts from the first beat, the first song to the last beat, the last song.
Yeah.
And these days, the music I play isn't hardcore by any stretch of the imagination, but the way that we approach a live show sort of is. And what I mean by cheating is just a bit like, I feel like sometimes we're sort of delivering effectively a hardcore live show to an audience who've never seen a hardcore band before. Because quite often people come up to me and they go, I've never seen a show that energetic before. And I'm like, you want to go and see Secret All and learn a thing or two. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you ever seen Converge play? They're going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's... but it's, I mean, and obviously it's not like that all the way through. I mean, there is we have our kind of quieter moments in the set, and a lot of it's about sing-alongs and that kind of
yes.
thing. But you know, I like to leave a stage feeling like I've got nothing left.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good feeling. That feels to me like I've done my job properly. And you know, there's something kind of there's a philosopher called Alain de Botton who strikes me as a wally. And the reason I say that is he wrote a long book about trying to put together like atheist communion halls, because he's an atheist, but he was like, but there is a religious impulse for people to gather, and maybe we could have communal halls. And I read that and I thought to myself, this is a man who's never been to a good gig or or indeed a football match. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You prat. And it was just like, yeah, we have those already. And if I happen to be an atheist myself, not that that's important, but you know, there's obviously a communal religious impulse that humans have to gather together and to subsume themselves into a wider whole. At its worst, that turns into dangerous political movements like fascism. But if we can find ways of satisfying that in a not only a peaceful but hopefully a useful kind of way with a gig, do you know what I mean? It's like then yeah, awesome. And that's what I want to. That's what I love when I go to a show, and that's what I want to try and create, is that moment where people can just like leave their shit at the door and come in and have a good 2-3 hours of just being part of a team. Do you know what I mean? That's a good feeling.
I would totally agree. When I first started listening to music, I was always wondering what this mysterious gig was. You know, when you're like 12, 13, what are these things about? And it is that sense of community. And I would say
absolutely,
definitely yourself and the times I've seen you over the years. But even I caught you actually at a sound check at Kendall Colin a few years ago.
Right.
And even that was energetic. I was like,
right.
So was this always a conscious choice from the very, very start?
I mean, well, okay, so the non-conscious part of it, and I mean, you could sort of have a debate about this, but I learned to play and I learned to sing in the context of being in punk and hardcore bands. You know, the first bands I was in, we were all just a bunch of kids slammed into a bedroom with a drum kit and a bunch of amps, and trying to play sort of Nirvana covers and Green Day covers and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and I just hit the crap out of my guitar then, and I screamed my lungs out, and I kind of still do. I mean, I'm calming down a little bit on both fronts, consciously when I need to, but like every sound guy I ever work with always kind of goes, Jesus Christ, you sing loud. And you know, my guitar tech, who's one of my best friends, despairs of how I treat my guitars because I just hammer the shit out of them. I still do.
How many do you go through a 2 hour?
Well, we've actually... This is an aside, but it's a geeky one, so we'll do it. I've been a Gibson endorsee for a few years, and they're great, and I love Gibson guitars. They're wonderful, and I love playing them. However, it's got to the point where I'm just been damaging these really quite expensive Hummingbird guitars so much that on this tour we're trying out me playing Epiphone Hummingbirds instead, which is the sort of cheaper range that Gibson make. And the thing is, once you're plugged through a pickup and a DI and then a PA and a mixing desk and all the rest of it, the actual sonic difference isn't huge, but it means that I can quite happily batter the shit out of them without kind of going, this thing costs £5,000. You know, so I've now have like 5 identical Epiphones set at the side of the stage, and if one of them dies, it's kind of like, meh.
Next one.
Next one. I mean, the thing is, I've never been into the whole sort of, so despite being a huge Nirvana fan, one of my bugbears of them as a band was always the smashing up equipment thing. It's just like, by contrast, there's that famous bit of footage of Pete Townsend at Woodstock where he finishes his guitar solo and just throws the guitar into the crowd. It's like, Kurt, mate, if you don't need that shit, there's a lot of kids in here who will go a long way with it.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you know what I mean? And it would be way more punk for them to hand their gear into the audience than to just...
Never thought of it that way, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually, so years ago, we were on tour in Europe with a band called Andrew Jackson Jihad, who are one of my all-time favourite bands. They've changed their name to AJJ these days. I think they got bored of getting stopped by the But they're based around a guy called Sean Burnett, who's one of the best writers in the world. And sometimes they tour and it's just him, and sometimes it's full band, and it sort of expands. But I invited them out on tour, and they came as a two-piece. They didn't have a drummer, and I got pissed and bought a drum kit somewhere in Germany and just sort of put it on the back of the stage and started joining in. So I joined AJJ on drums for a tour, which was really fun. I've got an AJJ tattoo on my leg for it. But at the end of the last show, I wasn't going to take that. It was a terrible drum kit I bought from like a charity shop. I wasn't going to take it home. So at the end of the last gig, we just handed it to the crowd, and it was hilarious because people were just like, "What is happening, please?" And like this one guy at the front got the kick drum.
Got the kick.
Yeah, and like they were the support band. This was before my set, do you know what I mean? And he was just like, "This is amazing." And then he was like, what do I do with this now? Not least because he'd obviously, queued up and got his place in the front row. Of
course.
And he was just sort of like, I don't quite know what to do with this now. And I think
the cymbal could be quite a dangerous bit of kit.
Yeah, I mean, we handed them rather than throwing them. But it was kind of cool. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever done anything with any of that equipment, but rather than just like chucking it in a dumpster out back, pass it on.
Definitely.
So one of the things that I wanted to speak to you about, which you sort of touched on with the whole team community there, sort of feeling. When I listen to a lot of your music, a common theme that I pick up is everything's wrong, but everything can be fixed. I don't know if that's a fair reflection.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's funny. Like I always think I kind of wish I was a bit more of a goth than I am.
Right.
By which I mean, like, it would be more sort of like fashionable and fetching to be a bit more of a pessimist. But I have a sort of optimist gene in me somewhere. I'm not sure if I know that everything can be fixed, but I do believe that I mean, I would say the central philosophical fact that exercises me is the fact that we're all going to die and life is incredibly short, and that there's not nearly enough time for me to be both a paleontologist and a skydiver and an international linguist and a musician. Therefore, you have to get on with it, and you have to make choices and so all the rest of it. So, but then within that, it's like as long as there's another day, as long as you wake up of a morning, there's stuff to do. There's shit to get on with, I don't know whether everything can be fixed. Probably not. I mean, I definitely believe in the fallibility of humans. We're all fucked and broken people. And, I think that I'm extremely suspicious politically of people who think that they can sort of fix humanity or sort of build any kind of system that's based around people being excellent all the time. It's just kind of like, that's not ever happened before. Why would that start happening now? That's. I mean, any scientist will tell you that's a sort of extremely unlikely hypothesis. Human beings have been awful to each other for all of history, but if you just do what I say, then everyone's going to be lovely to each other. It's like, no, it sounds like authoritarian bullshit to me. But I think that I'm constantly pleasantly surprised by people. I think that in the right circumstances and the right motivation, people can be really good to each other. And I'm trying, if I can, that's the other thing is like, whilst I am quite pessimist about quite a lot of things, I don't necessarily see the point in harping on about that because it doesn't seem to help. Do you know what I mean? And I'd rather try and sort of be part of a solution than part of a problem, So I mean, one of the things for me is like, I long ago gave up the idea of changing the world. I think there's two problems I have with people who say they want to change the world. The first is that they generally haven't asked the world if it wants to be changed. And the second is that what you do by announcing you're going to change the world is you set yourself an unmeasurable target, which means that it's impossible to ascertain whether you're succeeding or failing, which means that people can quite happily live out their lives as essentially moral narcissists or indeed onanists because they can sort of present themselves as like, I'm saving the world. And it's kind of like, okay, I mean, you might be or you might not be. There's no possible way of us ever telling. Whereas if you say, this is why I respect people who go into like local politics, for example, or who work with achievable charitable aims, you can judge whether or not you're succeeding and failing in making the world a better place. And I think that's a much more respectful thing to do. I don't do either of those things. And I'm not claiming that I do. What I can do, though, the area over which this has turned into a really long answer.
No.
The area over which I have control is my shows, right?
Yeah.
And I can work quite hard to make sure that the atmosphere at which quite large numbers of people gather under my aegis is in line with my philosophical approach, and that includes things like egalitarianism, people being equally welcome and equally worthy of consideration, not judged for the choices first of all, not judged for things over which they have no choice, and also then not judged over choices that don't affect other people, like gender or sexual orientation or whatever. And this tour we've got Stay Up Late, who they bring people with learning disabilities into shows, which is really cool. And we've had Safe Keeps Women out, we've had Able to UK, who work on disabled access to venues, and all that kind of stuff. And it's really, that's the bit of the world that I can change. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and I'm not going to save the world doing that, but if maybe I learned the values that I hold dear at hardcore shows.
Okay.
I learned all of this shit going to hardcore shows, and I hope that if there are younger people coming to my shows, that they might come away with similar ideas. That would be kind of cool.
I like that. You're clearly someone who gives a lot of thought to everything that you're sort of doing. I'm interested. So, if you were to look back at the end of the year, what does good look like? What's a successful year for Frank Turner?
Well, I'm trying in my old age to not entirely judge that on number of shows. To not entirely base my self-worth on the number of shows I've played in the year. Yeah. There was definitely a long period of my life where I was engaged in this really sort of machismo kind of touring arms race. And I realised a couple of years ago that I was the only competitor in said arms race, and that I was kind of killing myself to no appreciable end, other than being able to kind of sit alone in my one-bedroom flat and go, to no one. Do you know what I mean? And it's also just, if you just do the same fucking thing over and over again, you become quite one-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept finding myself kind of like, at a party or a dinner party with home friends or whatever, and everyone's sort of talking about real life, and I'd be like, yeah, the loading at Club Uferback's rubbish, isn't it? Yeah. And it's like, oh man, security guards in Eastern Europe, whoa. And just everyone else is like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so I am trying to sort of be a bit more of a three-dimensional human in my old age. I mean, I think that, contrary to all of that, and indeed to popular opinion, I think an awful lot of, first and foremost, hold on, let me consider this. I do two things in life. I'm a professional entertainer and I'm a songwriter. The two are obviously closely linked. I quite often use the fruits of the latter to sort of try and be good at the former. Yeah. But they're two separate things. And I think that I'm reasonably good at being an entertainer, touch wood. Hopefully it doesn't make me sound like my own ass, but I do it a lot. The songwriting part of it is the thing that I spend more time thinking about these days, simply because there's room for improvement. And I spend boring amounts of time thinking about songs and taking apart other people's songs and considering what is a song and how does one construct a song and why is it that Townes Van Zandt is perfect. And do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I it's funny because I try and be really analytical when it comes to my art, but not too analytical, because I think it is possible to kill the thing you love by pulling it apart too much. Mm-hmm. But I definitely, I sort of like, there's a song on the radio at the moment. I don't really listen to the radio very much, but there's a song on the radio by Clean Bandit called Symphony.
Yes. Yeah.
That is the fucking stone cold best song I've heard in a decade. That is a son of a bitch written song. It's very well produced, but just the melodic structure of that song is fucking flawless. And it was just like, and it's really nice for me as a songwriter to hear that and go,
I need to do better.
Hold on, what have they done there? Yeah. How did they do it? So immediately I pick up a guitar and start working out the root chords for it and seeing how the melody runs up a scale and whatever else, and it's all good.
Cool.
We can do one more if you want.
Just very conscious of time. We always end the episode with a good cause that you may have. Mm-hmm. So if there's any good causes you would like to highlight, or charities you would like to highlight, we'll put the links on the website.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I hopefully saying this in a non self-promoting kind of way, but I try and do my bit for charitable stuff. Yeah. The one that's kind of exercised me the most lately, outside of all the stuff I was talking about earlier to do with kind of gigs and stuff, is I was lucky enough to go to Sierra Leone last year with a charity called Way Out Arts, who are looking after some of the poorest people in one of the poorest countries in the world. And in a way, I can't really say this without sounding like a sort of typical white middle class gap year kid, but it was life changing. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing what I can to support them. I'm heading back out there early next year, hopefully. And yeah, they were just amazing, and they deserve all the help and support they can get.
Cool. Well, what we do is we always put in the show notes links to the website, how people get involved, and
Way Out Arts.
Way Out Arts.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Perfect.
Oh, awesome.
Right. Throat infection or not, he still sounded all right, didn't he? I thought, considering he had a throat infection, he was playing live that night. He still wasn't whispering, for instance. He was still chatting on to us and giving us a lot of good information about what he does and why he does it.
Yeah, well, just on the whole throat thing, and this comes back to what we were talking to Paul Langley about, in terms of the tour manager and making sure he's as comfortable and as happy as possible. So like we said, it was 1 in, 1 out. There was, when we were going in, there was his previous interview coming out,
That's
and
right.
as soon as we finished, there was another set going in.
Yes, that's right.
But his tour manager,
Trey,
who's absolutely spot on, full of energy,
yes,
which is clearly a requirement for that type of role.
it has to be. Yeah, if you're doing a bucket load of shows.
But she was, when we were downstairs at the door at the academy, she was speaking to the guys on the door saying, "Where's the nearest coffee shop?" And you know, Frank, he was like obviously gasping. He needed a drink. Bang, off she goes. Sort of runs to the nearest
Starbucks
shop or whatever, gets it done. And
it was a bucket of coffee she came back with. That was a large.
It was definitely a large.
As a non-coffee drinker, that looked like a lot of coffee.
Yeah. And, you know,
we even heard it at the end when the sugar was going in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So it was just an indication of that.
What a tour manager does in real life. We saw it going on.
Exactly. It was a small thing, but you could see when she turned up, he's like, "Oh,
yes.
Excellent. It's just what I need."
Just what I need.
Another thing off his mind.
I think we've got a couple of extra sneaky minutes because of it.
Sneaky.
The best
minutes. Of all the minutes.
Oh, anything that's sneaky is
it's
good.
Like a cheeky pint.
Ooh. Yeah, it's like a cheeky pint.
Everyone likes a pint of beer, but if it's a cheeky pint,
one that you shouldn't really be having.
So live performances.
Yes, one of my favourite. I even said it in the interview. I love going to gigs, and I used to, when I was younger, I used to love, like, what is this gig that people talk about? Because when you're younger, you don't go to as many as when they.
Well, I like the fact that he makes it an event, and
every time, 120 gigs left.
And the bit that, whether it's specific for his audience, that, you know, he used to be in hardcore type bands. So I like the point that many people who go to see his show, they think, bloody hell, that's like nothing I've ever seen, because his audience aren't necessarily used to it. And Frank will happily admit, his shows are by no means hardcore.
Yeah.
But to a lot of people, they are.
They don't stop.
No.
There's still an ethos of the hardcore element and the... Well, he mentioned himself, like the gathering expectation of it and the communal experience of a gig, like a football match, he said. And it that is true. I think if you can get your live performances right, you're going to get more fans and longevity of fans.
Because that can go the other way as well. I remember when Plain White Tees, in the sense of when they had the song out, I don't know whether it was called
I think Delilah. It was called Here There Delilah, yeah.
Yeah, that was a very slow sort of love song.
Yes.
The rest of their material was nothing like that. So a lot of people who only knew that one song would turn up to their gigs and go, what the hell is this? Instantly didn't. Like it all went south.
Yeah, similar to Sugar Ray and the song Every Morning.
Yes, another good example of that.
Please send more examples on a postcard. Strictly private and confidential.
Well, yeah, but for Frank, it works.
Yes.
The audience, it's not too far away from what the audience might like, but it's a little different to what they necessarily expect. And it's just sufficiently different that it gives them that memorable experience.
Because he is a rock and roll, indie type of artist, and I mean indie in the independent status, but it's not like a rock and roll indie gig.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interaction with the crowd, but it's never too laboured. The songs are played fast, but never too fast. The songs are loud, but never too loud. Everyone sings along, and everyone bounces along and bops along, but it never seems too like rowdy. And he even says at the gig that night, he went, one of the main rules is just don't be a dick. Don't be a dick to everybody, and be nice to everyone and pick people up.
Well, being nice to everyone, that's one of his core things that he wants to, messages he wants to get across. Well, what I liked about Frank is he's got a view or an opinion on most things, seemingly. You could see he very quickly took our conversation into a political sort of theme.
Yes.
You could tell that's just what he's passionate about, that's what he likes talking about. I get, irrespective of the type of questions that we were going to ask, I think it would have ended up sort of talking about certain things. And it's, you could see he is actually bothered about that sort of stuff.
I'd agree. And bothered in the right way, not as in like, I really get behind this cause. He knows about the cause and has facts to back up the cause. And it's not just a case of giving it lip service because I'm an artist and I have a charmed life and I do all this thing that people would love to do. I actually look into it on purpose. Yeah,
he thinks about things. I got the impression that he is a thinker and what it is that he's doing. And that's what I like when I was when I asked him the question about how he sort of measures success and what a good year looks like for Frank Turner. I was fairly confident that he'd have given that some thought in the past and he'd known. It was interesting now that many bands, and potentially for good reason, would measure success as, we'll have played this many gigs in this many cities, we've to this sold out this many venues or whatever it might be, and that's probably a reasonable measure.
On the balance sheet it will be, yeah.
Well, there's that, yeah, and then just how many people you've reached out to.
Yeah.
So that made sense, but then he'd obviously got to a point where that no longer was a viable measure in terms of what he wanted to achieve and what, therefore, good would look like. So it was interesting how he'd got to the point where his thought processes had moved beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he will always sell a certain amount of albums because he's got a very loyal fan base. And he's likely to sell out most venues he plays, especially in this country. He's got a really big following across in America and Canada and in Europe. So he knows that the bills are going to get paid, but he likes to have that experience, as we've just mentioned. And he also, that night, had on the Baltimore Homeless Choir on, which can't be a cheap person to get across and tour with, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Followed by the band Arkells, Canadian band. So he's also having great people on before him to up his game as well. So if you're coming to my show, I'm going to make people before us really good, so I can be really good for you. And I just think he does a lot of things for the right reason. I know it might sound like me and you are going, yeah, Frank Turner, but in the way we are. But I just like it when people who are successful do things for the right reasons.
Well, and what I liked about him is that he was quite open about, I'm not some do-gooder. I'm not constantly every minute of my life is doing something amazing for other people. That's totally not who I am.
Yeah.
But what I do like to do is
do what I can do with that, whatever I've got. Yeah,
that was it. Because just talking about the whole good causes, you mentioned the Stay Up Late charity and how people with learning disabilities would get to go to these shows and enjoy them. But then again, when it came to who his good cause of the week was that he wanted to shout out, it was Way Out Arts. So differences clearly, and I'm sure there'll be others as well.
Well, he said that this one was Stay Up Late, wasn't it? This tour. Yeah. Previous tour was Able UK. Another previous tour was Safe Gigs for Women as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's mentioned 4 charities
just off the bat.
Yeah, without us really prompting him.
Yeah. So again, I mean, we'll stick links to all of the ones that he's mentioned. But yeah, good to see it. So it was interesting. He's obviously mentioned how he does his bit and all the rest of it, but he's still talking about how one of these things he's trying to do is become a more, I think, as he put, 3-dimensional human. Mm-hmm. And what I found interesting about that is that he gigs obviously all over the world, and his lifestyle is sort of built around touring and things. And what he'd found, and I hadn't really thought about this, but you might think that your party banter or repartee, as Mark Morris would refer to it as, is really interesting because you're doing this amazing, cool job playing music around the world. But it's like, when your actual lines you're coming out with is stuff like, I love the example he gave, door staff in Eastern Europe. They're bloody nightmares, aren't they? Like, no one cares.
Yeah.
If you're in just a social circle of like people who aren't in bands.
Yeah.
So almost having to consciously take himself out of that sort of. I mean, it's just something to think about, I guess, if you do get to the stage where you're just constantly touring, to remembering that there is a world outside of gig, hotel room, venue, gig, hotel room, venue, van,
tour bus,
gig,
yeah, you're right, and that is another part of his always thinking. But what other things, to going back, because I think we've jumped a bit across various things, I quite liked as well his story about when he loves Nirvana, as a lot of people do, but when they smashed the kit up, he didn't enjoy it. He'd think, why are you doing that? Give it to people. And he went on tour and bought a drum kit to support the support band, and gave the drum kit away at the end. And like, if you're in the crowd, one, you've got a cymbal from a Frank Turner gig, which is mint, but also like someone could actually, that could be used. He doesn't need it.
I don't know how much someone would have got out of one bass drum.
I know, but it's quite
going home. Right, I've got a bass drum.
Well, if it can come to four,
doom, doom.
Yeah. Well, you can maybe go a bit faster.
That's the start of a kit, though.
It is the start, yeah. But like you're saying, it's if other bands, like, instead of breaking it, gave it away, like the whole kit.
No, I think it's a good point, which interesting given the amount of guitars that he seemingly goes through as well. I was like, on the one hand, like, yeah, totally get what he's saying, but then I'm thinking, well, treat the guitars like you've got a bit nicer.
I think he just likes to he likes to give it everything.
Yeah, well, which is fair enough.
It totally is, yeah.
The final point that I think again is starting to crop up with various people that we've interviewed is that he will deconstruct other people's songs, learn them, figure out how they've done whatever chord progression, how they've come to pull that song together, and Frank seemingly is no different to a lot of people we've spoke to, and that's something that he does. Doesn't matter whether it's an old song or whether it's something new that he's recently heard.
Yeah. If
he hears something, he likes it, he wants to know how to play it.
Yeah. I also like the fact that because Clean Bandit, the song he spoke about, is a pop song.
Yeah. It's not really anything like his stuff.
But it's still that appreciation of someone else's musical craft when something's good. And it's not like, oh, it's a pop song, it doesn't count. It's still like that whole be more kind ethos that he's got. A good song is a good song.
Quote Mark Radcliffe, if I like it, I like it.
But just to quickly recap on the charities of the week. So I've said charities there. The three charities that he's focused on in his tours, like I said, was Stay Up Late, Able UK, and Safe Gigs for Women. So very gig orientated. It's not just we've just put a charity on to look cool and we're helping out. These are three charities associated with gigging for different groups of people. It still blows my mind that we need a charity called Safe Gigs for Women. I just can't comprehend it. Yeah. But it's obviously a thing, and I am more than happy to put links and publicise it here. But again, it blows my mind that we need a charity like that.
Yeah, boy, well, the fact that it needs to exist highlights a point in itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the main charity you spoke about, and you did want to say, not in a gap year wanky way, is Way Out Arts.
Yeah. So they do all sorts of things. Whether it's youth training programs or whether it's mental health awareness.
Especially this week in Mental Health Awareness Week as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
But you're right. It does a lot of work, and he was in Sierra Leone. So
I don't know why I said
it was one of those moments where I was thinking, "This is a rise to exist moment to get the country ranked." I was like, "No, you do know this. It was in your brain box." Yeah. So again, countries that will benefit so much from this. Every country benefits from the arts, and every society benefits from the arts. But
yeah, culture's important.
Culture isn't, to quote another guest, culture is important.
Yeah, Ross Millard.
But even if you just have a look at the website, like any other charity that we promote on here, it's definitely worth having a look at.
Yeah, some great work. There's videos, music, all sorts of stuff on the website. Definitely worth a visit.
Yeah. So lastly, I just want to thank Frank Turner again for his time.
Thanks, Frank.
And also his tour manager, Trey, who was excellent.
Thanks, Trey. Yes.
So yeah, that's everything for this week.
Coming up next week, we speak to one of Virgin EMI's latest signings, Adam French, about transitioning from band to solo artist, scams, the early days of a deal, and playing in Botswana.
We've reached the end of this week's episode of Anyone Can Play Guitar podcast.
Big thank you for tuning in, and remember to stop by iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.
While you're there, it would be amazing if you could leave a rating and a review.
All the show notes can be found at www.acpgmusic.com, and if you want to get in touch,
email us your questions, any feedback and any suggestions to info@acpgmusic.com.
That's it for now. Keep supporting upcoming artists,
and we'll catch you next time.